National Assembly's monitoring and accountability approach requires ministers to respond to questions sent to them by members of parliament within 10 days. But several ministers have yet to respond to questions from MPs as the end of the second quarter. These include Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, Thandi Modise, Sihle Zikalala, Peggy Cele, Pravin Gordhan and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. The National Assembly has now called on Deputy President Paul Mashatile to hold offenders accountable. But does this attitude show a lack of accountability? Let's get some clarity from Professor in the School of Public Leadership at Stellenbosch University, Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, who gives us some perspective. A very good morning to you. Thank you for your time. How do you see it? What does this inaction represent?
Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners. Thank you very much for having me. This clearly undermines the objectives of our architecture of our government, which says that executive would be held accountable, or the legislature, which is parliament in this case, would give oversight on the activities of the executives through responding to questions. And if that does not happen, then it would mean that there is lack of accountability. There is also lack of oversight that happens, and then that leads to undermining of the system of accountability overall.
We understand that the issue here is not, that the backlog has essentially been cleared. But as the DA weighed in as one of the opposition parties who were really putting this to the forefront, that the point here is not about the backlog. It's about the fact that deadlines were not met. Therefore, it begs the question, does the administration value the important role that Parliament plays?
I think for me, it's a question of whether when decisions are taken, when questions are sent to the executive, in this case the ministers, whether they prioritize these questions that are sent to them and respond accordingly, or make sure that they send the response accordingly. It seems that the priority is not necessarily to respond to some of these questions and not necessarily the issue around the backlog, which worries if an institution or a section of government that should hold you accountable and you don't prioritize that responsibility, then talks to a worrying attitude that you would have. And that's what we should talk about, really, about why does that happen? Why is these questions not prioritized by ministers?
Let's talk a little bit about those questions. I mean, clearly they may open up the MP to some scrutiny and a sense of accountability, which speaks to discussions that need to be handled and also perhaps informing the public of what is happening on the inside.
Certainly, most of the questions whether performance has happened or why it has not happened or why has certain decision been taken or not taken. It also wants to give a sense of understanding as to what was the rationale for a decision that is taken. There would only be assumptions until such time that a minister would then come to Parliament and clarify the issues, give facts to certain issues where there might not be facts or there might be disputes of facts. And if that does not happen, you would perpetuate a situation where people speculate about what happened, why it happened, and how it should be resolved. And that helps in dealing with those issues of speculations. Yeah. If it doesn't happen, then you continuously have these speculations all over.
The other part of this discussion, Professor, is centered around the call by opposition parties. They're still in some sort of a battle with Parliament over establishing a portfolio committee to exercise direct oversight over the presidency. I mean, how effective could that be? And what are some of the challenges that opposition parties are facing as they try and push this through?
I think for me, the bigger issue is around whether indeed it is necessary to have an oversight committee in the presidency or not. We would know that the deputy president is head of government business, and therefore sitting in that office of the presidency also has a responsibility to ensure that issues of governance within the presidency itself happens. If opposition parties are then saying that That system does not work because the Deputy President does not have sufficient authority to be accountable for that office, or he doesn't sufficiently report on the activities of that office. Maybe that discussion might be valid. If that is not the case, then you will have a duplication of a system, a duplication of committees, and that would render these committees ineffective. There would be conflict of turf, and so forth and so forth. So I think we must start with that debate first, or with that discussion first, as to whether the current system is effective, what are the defects in the system, how can we remedy them, before thinking about another committee.
I think one of the possible questions, as you raise the issue of what are the defects in the system, because opposition parties are saying that it's unacceptable that after nearly 30 years of democracy, the budget of the presidency largely goes unchecked by Parliament.
No, certainly that's true. That's accountability. I think there are other remedial actions that Parliament can take rather than creating a committee of that nature. It could actually ask the President to account whenever he is invited in Parliament. It could also ask administrators and the President to account for that. But I certainly don't think that creating more committees does help us. We need to create mechanisms that are more effective in terms of accountability. Public resources, which the President's budget is also a public budget, must be open to public scrutiny. You don't really need a committee to ensure that that happens.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps leave it there for now.